On the record. Until they scrubbed it off the record.
Hello and welcome to On the Record. Those of you who joined us last week were probably amazed, as I was, by some of the latest research in the field of UFOs. There is so much to talk about, however, we were unable to fit it all into one program, so my guest again this week is UFO researcher, former state Senate candidate, and award-winning pilot John Lear. Mr. Lear.
By the way, real quick, so I was going to watch this thing, right? Or I did because I was doing these fucking B movies, right? I was doing these fucking B movies, and I was gonna watch this flying saucer kind of thing that was like almost like a documentary, and it was made back in the 50s, and it was so no nonsense. It was so transparent. And there was stuff that I had never even fucking heard of. I didn't know there was shit before Project Blue Clip or whatever. And I was like, what? Well, they were so transparent back then to the American people. What the fuck happened in the 90s? When they like debunked everything or, you know, took advantage of these people that sound crazy and, you know, use them and their voices to sort of undermine the whole fucking thing. Like, what the fuck happened, you know? Like, there was so many sightings and shit in the 90s that, like, was our government covering for negative extraterrestrials at the time?
Nice to have you here again.
Always a pleasure to be here, George.
To begin with, we have this concept of the people from other planets as little green men.
Not in my experience. In my experience, they are fucking huge.
Are they all the same, or we got different kinds of them?
George, there's at least 70 different species, and probably more. But yes, as odd as it sounds, there are little green men. That's not the ones we usually see, though.
I've only heard of
we
a couple of species.
We see the little gray ones. They're about 4.5 feet tall.
Mantis,
we see the ones that are
big
called the
chalky
Nordics.
whites.
They're about 7 feet tall, look like us.
Orc
they're invariably blonde
ones
hair
that could
and
be
blue-eyed.
like
they're one
black,
of the
green,
species
blue,
that we have on ice.
orange.
One of their crashes we recovered.
Obviously, with different species, they have different motives. I mean, are there good aliens and bad aliens,
good
from what
aliens
you know?
and bad
Well, I mean, they are people.
All kinds of ways and reasons for interacting with us.
And what are some of the reasons? Why would they be here?
Genetic experiments, trying to... there's a misconception here. People think that our space brothers would bring us, good things and teach us how to
be
get
very
rid of all
cautious when you
diseases
accept
and,
gifts from folks.
If you stop and think about it, that may not be the best thing, because if you had a society without any disease and everybody starts living 150 years, that creates a lot of problems.
Ah, fuck you. I want to live 150 years. Fuck you, bro.
You believe, in part, that the movies E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind, were not entirely just the creative products of some Hollywood director, that maybe...
I heard this really interesting theory about that stuff, by the way. I heard that Steven Spielberg creating certain things really upset somebody. Like, there was a reason why we had so much propaganda where it was like, War of the Worlds, oh my god, extraterrestrial, intergalactic warfare. It's all warfare, it's all war and shit, you know? We had that propaganda for a really long time. And then Steven Spielberg came in with like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T. and shit. And it's like, they're peaceful, almost like family friendly and shit. And I heard a theory, and there's a reason why Steven Spielberg dropped that whole aliens are your friend shit and then started doing more like, more shit where they're hostile. And that is because he might have undergone some attacks. Maybe an abduction experience of his own or something. And then his worldview changed. As they wanted it to, because I don't know. I don't know what is the purpose of wanting us to like have this view that if we did see an alien species, it would immediately like, oh, gear yourself up for war, Independence Day, you know? Reagan always had that line where he said that like he said, how fast would we drop all of our differences and unify together against an outside alien threat? Something kind of like that, right? And that's some New World Order shit. Maybe, you know, maybe once their hologram technology is good enough, then they can pull that fucking trick on humanity and try to get that fucking shit going. I think maybe that would be their, like, final deception. That's not really something they're gonna do unless there's just absolutely nothing else in their fucking cards.
There's more to that. Why don't you explain?
They were carefully guided by representatives from MJ12, who is this organization that is in charge of the cover-up, in order to get us ready for the release of the information that there are indeed aliens. And in both those movies, they used small.
Just recently, they had an alien in some Spanish museum or something. It was a joke to everybody.
To prepare us that the idea of
because it looked like fucking paper mache.
Are going to help us out.
Unfortunately, they're not so benevolent. So they made probably one of the most disastrous mistakes when E.T. was put out. At that time was before we discovered what I call the double cross or the grand deception. And they were trying to get us used to the benevolent.
Which is a terrifying title, the grand deception.
That isn't the case.
Why don't you take a couple of minutes? Now, you've done as much research on UFOs as just about anyone, I'd imagine. And if you haven't done it, you know people who have. Where did it all start, and how have we put this picture together of...
It's really interesting, too, whenever you go into the conversation where they might be demons, because you have these entities from the sky and whatnot. And then trying to fulfill a grand deception. That is... Man, just saying that just gives me fucking shivers. That is a horrifying concept. But yeah, these entities... I heard this one story one time that, like, way back when they tried to negotiate for the world governments to drop their nukes or whatever so that, like, there could be world peace, and then they would, like, come in and help usher whatever. I'm like, fuck that. Fuck no, what the fuck? No, we're not destroying our fucking weapon. No.
Where they came from and why they're here.
Well, the whole thing started in July 2nd, 1947. That was the first crash.
First crash of an alien spaceship.
Of an alien spaceship.
Roswell?
July 6th is when they recovered it and sent it to
I thought it was like
Air Force
50s, so it was late
July
40s?
7th is when they held the press conference and told the people it was a weather balloon, which the press bought hook, line, and sinker.
Maybe it was something before.
September of that year, President Truman established MJ12, and the purpose of that was to study the saucers and cover up the existence of UFOs.
Yeah, this totally doesn't exist. By the way, we're going to open up a whole fucking division on your taxes.
And what'd they do with them?
They autopsied them. Dr. Detlef Bronk was the chief surgeon, so to speak. He was the one that named them EBEs. It stands for extraterrestrial biological entities. And
I'm getting uncomfortable.
We captured 3 live EBEs. They were numbered in their order of capture: EBE-1, EBE-2, and EBE-3.
Where did we capture? Where did this happen?
In different crashes. EBE-1 lived with an Air Force colonel between 1949 and 1952.
He lived with an Air Force colonel?
The EBEs
an American dad or something?
An electromagnetic facility called a YY-2. It was designed by a Dr. Eric Wang, who worked directly for Dr. Kissinger, who has been in this cover-up since the very beginning. The reason they had to create an electromagnetic facility is the fact that the EBEs are so advanced, they're at least 500 million years advanced from us, and probably more. They can move by thought.
Move by thought.
And they can also disappear. But they can't move by thought through electromagnetic facilities. So they built this facility.
So they can, like, insta-teleport by thought?
And one either at Edwards or up at the test site.
At Groom Lake, Nevada.
At Groom Lake. Now, there's still one
and they can change what they're, like,
living, EBE-3.
Density, so they can be invisible, basically?
Eventually is going to be released to the public, and it's an interview with him. As hard as that may sound, as hard as that may be to believe, there is a videotape.
They say disappear, I say just make it invisible.
What is this language that the interviewers are...
I haven't seen the tape, so I don't know. But on this trip I told...
To be honest, the human eye, it's pretty it can only pick up certain wavelengths and shit. So if it just picks a certain wavelength that we visibly cannot pick.
I took gathering all this information. A guy in Albuquerque handed me 25 secret CIA memos. And if anything can be humorous in all of this, one of these memos, in the body of the text, it said, by the way, EVE-3 wants to see the ocean. We better make the arrangements or he'll disappear again. So while he couldn't get out of this facility, he could make himself disappear and cause him a lot of trouble.
Now, can they exist among us? Is that what you're saying, or do they have to have this special environment?
They have
to be able
special
to
environment, special air. It's my understanding they can only last about 20 minutes in this air.
You were saying also these gray ones are the ones that we see most of the
There's
time.
been movies
You said
like that.
Most of
War of the
there are a lot
Worlds
of different
especially.
motives for them being here. The gray ones. What kind of a deal we got going with them? Is that the bunch that you suggest we've made a deal with for military technology?
Well, I think we made a deal with them, and their ultimate, what they want to do is regenerate their own race. Now, apparently, they've either had some kind of nuclear accident, or they're on the backside of a evolutionary genetic curve, and they're going downhill instead of uphill.
You can go downhill?
In other words, in the autopsies, of which I have 2, we found out that their digestive system is atrophied. They can't eat through their mouth anymore. You know how they eat? Well, these cattle mutilations, they take the hormones and the enzymes from those cattle and they spread it on their skin, and their skin absorbs the nutrients and then excretes the waste back through their skin. And if you read Whitley Strieber's book or listen to him talk, he talks about when he's seen them doing this to their skin, and they're scraping the waste off.
Now, these cattle mutilations, there's been a film made about that, and perhaps in a couple of minutes we can take a look at some excerpts.
Oh
of
my
that.
God!
Strange Harvest
It was covered in their own
was a good
waste.
one, but another thing that happened here on March 4th, there was a documentary released on the best UFO photos that have been taken so far, including 1 minute and 38 seconds of videotape. Now, what happened is in November, this guy took these photos, took it into the TV station. They thought it was great, but nobody would believe it. So they spent 3 months checking the validity of the, authenticating.
That's 3 months that you could have been like.
And checking out the credibility of the witness. And when they
alerting
had it
the
all
American
down,
people.
they put out this documentary, 30 minutes. I mean, it's ironclad. They're here. But do you think it got on the network? No, it was just showed locally in Pensacola.
We have some of that, and perhaps when we come back, we can take a look at it. So stay with us.
And
for
we
more on
didn't
the
get
record.
to look at it. Wow. That is fucked. This is part 3. I found part 3.
Arizona and Utah, and it was a documentary made by Linda Moulton Howe for the CBS affiliate in Denver.
Okay.
And let's take a look at that now, a piece of it.
Colorado are going to die each year from hard winters, disease, lightning strikes,
Oh man,
predator
that's just
attacks, and other
eerie with the
natural
music
causes.
and shit. No.
But in northeastern Colorado, another favorite spot for the mutilators, Tex Graves, former sheriff of Logan County, insists the 93 mutilated carcasses he investigated were not natural deaths.
Dude.
The very first one we had was southwest of Sterling. When we first looked
They're
at
actually
it,
showing
it
it.
was just unbelievable that you could take an animal and do this too without leaving some kind of track, some kind of evidence behind, such as
Dude. That's gnarly.
cigarette butts, matches, handprints, footprints, but there was nothing. The animal looked almost horrible, and it was something that I didn't really want to believe then.
Almost horrible.
And there was, we probably had 5 or 6 others before I really did believe something strange was going on. We had one up north where we believe the animal was paralyzed and was alive when it was being mutilated.
Ah.
And here, the tongue,
my God,
the rectal
what?
area was taken out, but the animal dug a hole with its head.
It can
But
do
none
like
of
a
the other
mercy
parts of the
killing.
body moved, not even the legs. 6 north of town on a very hard pasture, almost like hard brick. We found tripod marks 12 inches across. The tripod marks were 14 feet apart. We
Okay,
found one
that's a
set
ship.
that had gone in the ground roughly 8 inches. And it would take a good post hole digger or shovel to dig in like this. It indicated something very heavy had set down in this area, yet there was no tracks leading from it nor to it. Almost nightly when this was going on, we could pick out a very brilliant, huge, brilliant light in the sky. We had a newsman take pictures of it with a very high-powered lens, but all we got out of this was the movement of it and the light showing very brilliant. Several times we observed.
All right, boys, we're landing. We're gonna get ourselves a cow.
And then come down toward Earth. This huge, brilliant light would hang in the air, and then when it would move, it could move up and down, backwards, forwards, travel very rapidly. And after a while, these smaller lights would join up with the larger one, and then they'd disappear.
Yeah, there's always this weird split thing.
The chief investigator for the district attorney's office in Trinidad, Colorado. Extraterrestrials are the ones mutilating animals.
Why is this so creepy looking? What is this weird film treatment?
Throughout the mutilations, all of us involved have been concerned with the possibility of the mutilations going from animals to human beings, understandably. Thank God to this point it hasn't happened. Whatever they're doing with the portions of these animals they are taking, I haven't the slightest idea.
Are they thinking it's some sort of cultist?
There's a reason for it. It's not haphazard. There's a pattern to it. I don't know. I think it's a wait-and-see game. What else can we do? If we do have beings from outer space doing this, with the capabilities to do things like this, what can we as a human race do? If they have the knowledge and the technology that it looks like they have, we're powerless. So maybe it's a wait-and-see game. I can't see anything else to do.
It just seems like that because you know so little about them.
Well, he says the mutilations have not gone from animals to humans yet. You agree with that?
There have been some humans. It's
trying to read his body language.
I'm going to steer away from that.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
Since the beginning
it's
of this
bad,
year,
man.
there have been over 200 animal mutilations on Long Island. It's supposedly a big secret. I know that there's 4 major law enforcement investigators working in plain clothes.
On Long Island, New York?
Yeah, Long Island, New York. We have an investigator working with us who's sending us videotape and keeping us informed of what's going on. So it still is a problem.
And you say it's food. That's what they're doing.
Well, food or genetic experiments, take your choice.
What happened to this conversation?
It hasn't gone maybe
Why did
to
they get
the point
dropped
of where they're mutilating humans,
put in
but
the
you do
dustbin of
believe there
history?
are abductions. And you also believe that at one point there may have been some kind of a clash between American military forces and these.
I heard about
that's one
that.
of the stories. When we began to discover what
wasn't
I
it on a
call the
base? There was an
Grand
actual fight.
Deception, was in 1979, and apparently there was some kind of clash. 1983 is the date that I call that we finally recognized that we had made a disastrous mistake. And that's when
the mask
MD-12
slipped.
realized that they were in deep, deep trouble.
Yeah.
They had made a deal with these people, and it had not worked out. And now the question was what to do.
You got about a minute left. What would you like to say to people out there to prepare them for it? Now, you've made allusions a couple of times when I've had you on the program that something is coming. We've heard that before, something is coming. Why do you think something is coming? What's coming? And how should we get ready for it?
At least not like out in the open
ready
yet.
for it. The reason I think it's coming is because I have contacts within the government that tell me that they're bracing themselves for something, but they're not going to tell us about it. George, maybe the cover-up was in our best interest, maybe not. Maybe the government underestimated the intelligence of the American people and decided we just couldn't handle it.
American people are actually pretty
But let me
fucking
tell
smart.
you this, the truth is still the truth, and nothing can
They say
change
through
that.
your shit.
Not the military, not the government, and not me.
John Lear, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have
So
you
it's
here.
a
and I'm sure we'll have
three-parter.
you back again.
Thank you.
Welcome back to On the Record. My guest again this week is UFO researcher
Found
John
it?
Lear. John, you say this documentary was put together in Florida recently, and it's some pretty stunning stuff.
Pensacola, Florida, and they've had all kinds of physicists and scientists look at the film. It's absolutely authentic. There is nothing fraudulent about it, and it's really interesting. I just can't understand. Well,
Hold
I
on.
can't understand why the networks didn't.
Welcome back to On the Record. My guest again this week is UFO researcher John
I want
Lear.
to read their
John,
body language.
You say this documentary was put together in Florida recently, and it's some
Let me
pretty
look at his
stunning
face.
stuff.
Pensacola, Florida, and they've had all kinds of physicists and scientists look at the film. It's absolutely authentic. There is nothing fraudulent about it. And it's really interesting. I just can't understand. Well,
I was
can
trying
understand
to
why the
detect
networks
him for
didn't pick it
lies.
up, because each one is controlled by a member of MJ-12.
His eyes
That's
are
quite
mostly
a
closed
claim,
until he
but we're
said
gonna
it's
take a look at the
absolutely
film now
authentic,
and
and then
see
he
if
looks
it's
straight
worth
over, like open eyes. So
suppressing.
let's see it.
Things were very normal around the house. Just a normal evening. My wife says
So they try to sell this to networks, and they wouldn't.
I'm
The
sitting at my
networks wouldn't
desk.
take it. Huh?
Out the window, I noticed something, a glow. I got up and walked around.
Oh
outside
man,
and looked.
fuck that.
It just didn't look like a helicopter or an airplane. I realized that it was not something normal. I thought I'd call on the police. And
Is
I
that
said,
the
"Well,
actual
I
footage,
better
not a
take picture
recreation?"
first."
Huh.
I had no feelings I was going to be, hurt or anything.
It's almost
I
translucent
took 4
looking.
shots and ran out of film, and again in my mind, take some more pictures. I ran back in, took the last package of Polaroid film out, opened up and crammed it in there, because the thing's flying around out there, I mean, get it quick.
Yeah.
It either
Damn,
saw
bro.
me or whatever, because
Those
it
look
started
like great
coming. It altered
pictures.
its course. It started coming my direction.
That was November 11th, 1987, about 6 o'clock in the evening. A Gulf Breeze resident who insists on remaining anonymous took these photographs. Charlie and Doris Summerby say they saw the same thing
So
that
these are the
night over
ones.
East Bay.
She has this weird little smile on her face.
Dory said, "Look, what's that, Charlie?" "I'll be down." There were portholes. You saw portholes of light coming out of the portholes.
And
It
over
almost
the
kinda
next
looks like
3
a
months,
crown.
Many more pictures would be taken.
It has like a weird top to it. Oh.
By different people.
It's a lot tall. Oh wow, look at that one. So many different people took this image.
And videotapes, too.
And I feel that there's absolutely no sign of a hoax, that the photographs are genuine, that the witnesses are telling the truth, and that this presents probably the best, without any doubt, the best photographic evidence in 40 years of UFO investigations.
I mean, it's pretty dope, man. But of course, our fucking news media is, a dam and not a
As the
river.
series goes on, we see a lot more of that videotape evidence. Which
Yeah,
is
there's a minute and 38 seconds of it, and it's
pretty interesting stuff. We've never seen that before, have we?
it's great. And on one morning, he goes out with his camera, and 3 of them show up, and he has a spectacular shot of 3 of them.
Oh, wow.
And on one of the shots, they tip the saucer so that they can see up in the inside in the bright glowing ring of however it's powered.
Take it that's not a weather balloon. The government wouldn't pretend it's a weather balloon.
No, that's for sure.
How does the government explain this, or has anyone ever put the question to them?
They're not even going to
Nobody's
address
put the
it.
question to them because they've still got their stock response is the Air Force quit investigating UFOs in 1969.
What do you suppose that
Under
bunch
one
wanted?
code name until
knew
they changed it
pictures
to a
were being
different
taken
code
of them.
name.
Why were they hanging around there?
It's got something to do with what's going on now, and I can't even fathom what's going on. But it shouldn't be too long before we find out.
A lot of stuff has happened in
Damn.
the interim between July 1947 and that incident we just saw. You were going to bring us up
I was
to date
going to
on
tell you that a lot of Air Force pilots and planes have been.
What really bothers me is that this guy obviously knows way more than he's willing to tell or share. And that is annoying. Because there's really fucked up shit. And, he probably thinks that the American people can only absorb so much. You can't drop like the whole freaking he dead. He died in 2022. So he died recently. How'd he die? I mean, they didn't shut him up prematurely, so... Controlled opposition?
Lots have been killed and the planes destroyed. The first one was the Thomas Mantell crash, January 7th, 1948. He was in a P-51 and he was chasing a flying saucer, ordered to chase one, and he got up to it and said, "Oh my God, it's huge," and that's the last thing.
Huge.
1948 was the second crash of a.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. That was so crazy, right?
1950 was.
So I was watching that B movie that was supposed to be a documentary about flying saucers. And I heard that the whole reason that the government even got involved with the UFO shit in the first fucking place was because it attacked one of our fucking pilots, like you just fucking said, and killed him. And I didn't fucking know that. I didn't know that whole investigation into UFOs started because they killed one of our fucking pilots. I've been into this shit since I was a fucking kid. What the fuck do you mean? And this wasn't like a big deal to the American, or we just sweeped it under the rug. It's just, you know, the fog came in and we forgot about it. We stopped sharing that little piece of the lore. And then it just like got memory hold. Like, what the fuck? That's an enormous fucking deal. Like, the fact that, I mean, this isn't just people having lucid dreams or seeing shit, supposedly. Every time you hear about anything to do with UFOs and abductions, it's always such a personal thing that isn't like, there's no footage of it, and you have to like take the word of these fucking yokels and shit. And it's like, but they fucking attacked one of our pilots and killed him. Bro.
It's the third crash near Laredo, Texas, about 30 miles inside the Mexican border. 1952, we had 2 weekends in a row where the UFOs flew over the Capitol, Washington, D.C.,
heard about that.
House.
Yeah.
Despite pictures and radar confirmations of the objects, the Air Force said...
How the fuck did this shit get memory hold?
Did this ever make the newspaper back in 52?
It made all the newspapers, but
yeah.
It's been such a fantastic mental programming that we've been forced to forget this.
Dude, this guy is so fucking like...
the most spectacular UFO events in history.
He's awake.
2 weekends in a row.
In the newspapers, I don't know if you've gone back and looked at the newspapers from that era, but how did the newspaper people explain what it was?
They told the Air Force line it was temperature inversion, but they had pictures of them. And it was just said it was temperature inversion.
And what happened after that? What's next?
The government established an intensive program of ridicule against anyone who said they saw flying saucers. And fear of ridicule.
Nothing ever changed.
The foundation on which
it's always the same fucking tricks to this very fucking day, man.
And they built that fear into anybody so that nobody would talk about it.
Fuck.
1952, Eisenhower was elected. He was briefed by Hillenkotter. Eisenhower, being military, took steps to ensure that the secret was kept. Because of his military background, he made it more military-oriented than, say, a civilian president would have. And it's this, I think, that has let his actions let the real power of the executive office slip through the hands of the president into MJ-12.
Damn.
And we've got a copy of, I think, outside of that document where Eisenhower is briefed in that.
He was briefed, and he set it up.
Dude,
and
President was briefed on it and shit, man. Like, come on.
Eisenhower witnessed an alien demonstration of technology and power at Muroc Dry Lake, which is now called Edwards Air Force Base.
How do you know that? How do you...
There was this hilarious meme, right? And it was of when Trump won in 2016. And it was him in this chair, and he looked fuck all. But he was sitting next to Obama, you know, with the transition of power. And it was like, the caption was like, Trump was just told about the aliens.
We have witnesses who were there.
Who say the president was there seeing...
The president was there. There's an English guy. He passed away. He either passed away just recently, but before he did, he was the last living person who was present at that meeting. And he said that Eisenhower told the aliens that the world was not ready for him. And nothing happened until the first part of the 60s. Several more crashed in the 50s. In 1960, Kennedy was elected. Eisenhower was the last president to have a full briefing on the alien problem. There was a disdain of elected officials throughout the intelligence and military communities, and they just didn't like elected officials. So every president since then has not had high enough clearance to know the whole problem. Now they know there's aliens, they know we've recovered saucers, and they know that
literally the deep state.
Technology. But there are certain other things which probably only about 25 people on the face of this earth know. Two traumatic experiences at the same time. And number two, they thought that the public would perceive this picture of aliens and spacecraft as a ploy by Nixon to divert the attention from Watergate.
Well, yeah, absolutely, you know. And by the way, Nixon's Watergate, that ain't shit compared to the shit that's been happening here lately, man. With the Russia hoax and everything else, like, the weaponization of our government in every institution is fucking wild. Like, the collusion, like, it makes Watergate look like nothing. Yeah, he's right about the American people can't deal with, like, two traumas. That's what I'm trying to say, is that, like, there is some fucked shit, and it's just too traumatic. And you have to baby step people into, like, information, you know, so that they can come to know.
They had drawings of these flying saucer landing, and they said, Rod Serling says, let's consider an event that could possibly happen in the future or may have already happened. But it did already happen. But what happened then?
I'm jumping ahead of you here, and we can backtrack a second. But the next president after Nixon, President Carter, I remember him as a candidate saying that one of the things he'd like to do when he got into office was to get to the bottom of this UFO stuff, to look into the Project Blue Book files, and to let people know.
Every president says
basically to open it up and let people know if it was a hoax, it's a hoax. If there's something more to it, but he never did that.
No,
can you imagine if JFK Jr. could sit there and fucking just unlocks everything about his fucking relative getting shot?
The public and the scientists. I'm convinced that UFOs exist because I've seen one. But MJ-12 got to him, and they explained how important it was to keep it a secret. And apparently he agreed
Men in Black.
Because we never heard anything from Carter.
Okay, what else? In between Nixon and Carter, anything?
The end of the 60s, when then I believe we made a deal, 1973, 1980, were cattle mutilations. 14,000 cattle mutilations all over Canada, United States, South America, and we believe that they used the parts of the cattle for food or genetic experiments. And there was a documentary made by Linda Moulton Howe called Strange Harvest. Reproductive organs, brain capacity unknown, colorless liquid prevalent in the body without red cells, no lymphocytes. And there's more in that particular report.
This is an autopsy report. And you
that's
said
what
the
they got from the
government
autopsy?
goes to great lengths, the Air Force in particular, to discredit this kind of stuff. Where did this come from? How did you get this?
That came in a private, that came from the private collection of Leonard Stringfield, who was one of the premier researchers. He worked for the Air Force in the early 50s in a secret project reporting UFOs. Then as a civilian, he continued his private research, and this is out of his collection.
Why does the government want to hide this? Why doesn't the Air Force just come forward? Why doesn't, why don't they level with us if this is all true?
Well, there's not really much they could say.
I think the reason why they don't want to come out and talk about this is just because they've been making some really fucked deals. And they don't want people to realize what's been going on. It has to be something like that. It has to. It's not just the sake that it'll shatter the human psyche or something. Like, I mean, I guess it would shatter our entire world perspective and way of life or whatever, because we finally have to compare ourselves to something. But like, there must be an arrangement that is so fucking awful that it is just more convenient that the American people don't aren't even aware that these things exist, like, for certainty. That's what I get from it. Anyway, thank you for enjoying this galactic horror with me.